So anyway,
So I want to start by talking a little bit about how we got here and the size of the problem. Feel free to follow along in the handout that we passed out. But the size of the problem and how we got here is important, because what we need to do is not only solve these problems, but make sure we don't repeat them in the future. Illinois right now, if we do nothing about fixing our budget this fiscal year, at the end of this fiscal year, we're going to have a $4.6 billion deficit. The reason we are in this deficit position is because the economy is bad. There's certainly no doubt about it. Revenues have dried up. We've had losses, job losses and revenue losses that have caused part of the problem. But part of the problem is also just our own doing. 2 governors in a row have been engaged in irresponsible budgeting, overspending, failure to save for the rainy day, revenue forecasts that were inaccurate, spending money we didn't have. All of these bad budgeting practices brought us to the point where we are right now. In the Comptroller's office, we've been advocating for responsible budgeting for 10 years. I engineered the creation of the first rainy day fund in Illinois and urged the General Assembly to put more money into it. We've tried to criticize and do away with the bad budgeting practices that allow us to put off our bills to the future, and have really tried to impose fiscal restraint. But many of our warnings were unnoticed and unrecognized and unmet. So here we are with this multi-billion-dollar problem. Now, you can hear about deficits at the federal level. Hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars of deficit spending that happens at the federal level. And for the most part, you won't feel it as you will in the state. Because the reason the state is supposed to have a balanced budget, and what happens when we don't have a balanced budget, is that we're late in paying our municipalities their share of revenues. We're late in paying our health care providers what they're owed when they provide services to the state. Billions of dollars in bills that we can't pay, that we're imposing upon other people, making their businesses more difficult to manage. That's why our health care programs are not working right now. That's why people are not able to see a doctor, even if they have a state health insurance card. We're not able to invest in schools properly. We're not able to invest in the social safety net, the programs that people count on during a recession. That is why, no matter what your passion is, no matter what your major concern is, whether it's education, healthcare, higher education, social programs that help people during tough economic times, job creation, economic development, whatever the issue you care about, if we don't deal with this fiscal crisis, we are not going to be able to meet that challenge and address that issue. And that is why the budget crisis and who's best to deal with the budget crisis is the #1 issue in this campaign. So that's the problem, that's the size of the problem, and why it matters to you. Here's the plan that we have proposed, and I will show how it contrasts with my opponent's plan. There are 3 parts to our plan. #1, we have to cut unnecessary government spending. #2, we have to find revenues that will not cause working class families and middle class families to have to pay more. And #3, we have to change our tax system to make it more fair, so that the wealthy are paying their fair share. The first principle of cutting is important. We've identified $1.6 billion in cuts that have to be made in state government. But we're not going to cut our way out of this problem. And anybody who says we can cut our way out of this problem either doesn't understand the problem or is not being truthful with you. But we have to start by cutting. And we've identified some cuts that will not hurt frontline services, will not lay off frontline workers, and instead will go towards administrative costs, bureaucracy, unnecessary contracts, and those things that we just simply can't afford right now. I'll give you an example. We call on $300 million in elimination of contracts, management, consulting, professional contracts that have just built up over the years. Last year, we had $1.8 billion in these types of contracts. We're calling on just $300 million in cuts in this area. Just a couple of weeks ago, I sent back to the governor $53 million in these types of contracts that I thought he should take a close look at and possibly cut. These were $43 million in advertising contracts and $10 million in a new timekeeping system for the state of Illinois. Now I ask you, At a time we're cutting the programs for the developmentally disabled, we're not able to put enough money into our higher education institutions, we're not able to pay our bills on time, and our healthcare programs are crumbling. I don't think it's the best time to spend $10 million on a timekeeping system for the state. And that's why I singled out that contract. Nor do I think it's the best time to invest tens of millions of dollars in advertising for the lottery. We're going to spend over $20 million in advertising for the lottery when I think people pretty much know we have a lottery. I think if they want to play the lottery, they know how to do it. I don't know if we have to actually educate them and advertise for it. But if we're going to, fine. Let's have a discussion about it. But lottery advertising was actually going to be increased this year over last year, while everything else is being cut. So it's not just cutting, it's prioritizing, making sure we're smart about how we spend our money. So that's an example of some of the cuts we're talking about. Another example is this. We're calling on all state agencies to cut their administrative operation lines to 2005 levels. Not grants, not those things that really impact people and human services, but their operations. And the reason I know this is possible is the Comptroller's office, my office, is now operating at 2001 levels. So we're asking agencies to cut to 2005. My office is already at 2001, and I'm cutting 11% below that. So any agency that says, oh, we can't do it, that's not possible, isn't trying hard enough. And we've led by example in that area. So those are two of many examples of cuts that we're proposing. Another example is some major changes in state government. I'm calling on the combination of eliminating Comptroller and Treasurer's duplication of offices. We don't need two fiscal offices. I'm calling on those offices to be combined. Basically eliminating the office I currently hold and eliminating the Lieutenant Governor's office. We've now lived 8 months without a Lieutenant Governor. I think we've proven that we can exist without one. So we're calling on the elimination of those offices. These are some of the examples of ways we can cut without hurting people, without laying off frontline workers, without cutting into vital state services. All right, so those are the cuts. But as I mentioned, we're not going to cut our way out of this problem. We have to find new revenues. But we have to do it in a way that is sensitive to the fact that working families can't afford to pay more right now. We're in a recession. They're barely making ends meet. We barely are able to hold it together as it is. And we can't ask middle-class families to pay more in taxes. So we try to be creative and progressive to find other ways to find money. Examples. The sales tax. We are proposing that we expand the sales tax base. Right now, Illinois only taxes, for the most part, the purchase of goods. So if you go to the store and you buy your kids school supplies, you're going to pay a sales tax, right? Well, if you go and charter a jet, if you're wealthy enough to do that, if you charter a limousine for the day, if you go and get elective cosmetic surgery, Botox injection, things of that nature, you don't pay a sales tax. We're calling on these luxury services to be taxed so that we can capture some of those revenues, but more importantly, make the sales tax more progressive so that we are expanding with the economy, but also asking those who can afford those types of luxuries to pay a little bit more for those luxuries to help us fund schools, healthcare, and vital programs. We have other ideas to bring in money right now, which is going to be, I think, helpful to our current fiscal situation. Closing corporate loopholes. There are loopholes on our books, giveaways that have been on the books for decades, that were intended to create jobs or just simply were there to help a certain industry that are no longer needed or effective. We can raise hundreds of millions of dollars by closing those loopholes and bringing more money into the state. So these are some of the short-term remedies and revenues that will help us balance the budget. But the final solution and the real solution is a little bit more difficult and is going to be much more long-term in nature. And that is changing our income tax structure. Illinois is one of only 7 states in the country that has a flat income tax. So that if you make $50,000 a year, you pay the same flat rate as somebody making $5 million a year. That is regressive, unfair, and is not a democratic way. Our proposal is to move away from the flat tax to the progressive graduated income tax, so that the more money you make, the higher the tax rate. And only families, households, making over $200,000 will see an increase in their income tax. This is a way to make those who are of greater means pay a little bit more. And it's unfortunate that we have to do that, but it's the only way out of this fiscal crisis. Under my plan, if you make less than $200,000, and by the way, 97% of families and households in Illinois make less than $200,000. So only 3% of people in the state will see an income tax increase. This is the way to bring in $5.5 billion for the state and finally get out of the deficit and investing in our priorities. My opponent has a different plan and a different approach. He wants to raise everybody's taxes 50%. Again, whether you make $50,000 a year or you make $5 million, under Pat Quinn's plan, your taxes go up 50%. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's responsible. And I don't think it's the way to go. And I hope you would agree. Now, here's the best part about it all. In order for us to move from the flat tax to the graduated income tax, the people of Illinois need to make that change because we need to amend our Constitution to do it. And so in the end, it'll be in your hands, and you will decide whether the best approach is to bring in more revenue, and if so, to bring it in through a graduated income tax, a progressive income tax, or whether you want to stay with the old system, where we have a flat tax that impacts middle class and working class families. So we are calling on the General Assembly to pass a constitutional resolution and amendment, put it on the ballot, and in November of 2010, the same time you're voting for governor and everything else, you will be voting on whether to move away from the flat tax to the progressive income tax. I believe it's the best course of action. I think it's the fairest approach, but it's in your hands, and that's the democratic way. And so I think that once we have more meetings like this, and we talk to people and lay out the problems, put forward solutions that are fair and progressive, responsible in nature, I think people will embrace these ideas. And that is what I'm basing my entire candidacy on the fact that I have a real comprehensive plan to get us out of the fiscal crisis, and that it's a plan that is fair, it's progressive, and it's responsible. And I hope you will agree that this is the best approach. I hope you'll take time to read my program today, go on my website, learn more, because in the end, we're all in this together. I have some good ideas, I believe I do. I'm sure you have some good ideas as well, but we're going to rise or fall together. And that's why I'm most proud of this plan, because it depends on you. It depends on you going to the ballot box and hopefully voting for me, but voting for these ideas and voting for our future. So I appreciate everybody coming here today. I hope I haven't bored you with too much detail, but I do think that everybody needs to know how serious the problem is and that the solutions are there if we have the courage to embrace them. So thanks everybody for coming, and I really appreciate your participation here today. Thank you.